I've heard about your interaction with Titanic musician. Can you speak about it a little more?
So very interestingly, after I finished designing the earthen, it was one of the largest earthen vaults of our country, designed completely without any formwork underneath it. And it has a great acoustic property that even though that convention center houses about 500 people, you can be standing at one end of the entire gigantic space and a person at the other end will hear you clearly without a microphone. Well, absolutely, you're speaking at your normal volume. You don't have a mic, you don't have any speakers, amplifier, nothing. And the person at the other end and the entire audience of 500 people can hear you without a microphone. So that was the whole space that I had created. This is way back 20 years ago, my first project straight out of college. And somehow or the other, I don't know how, I think through a friend of a friend, he came to know about it, Mr. Paul Peabody. And one random afternoon, I was sitting in my office and I get a call and he introduces himself. And he says, "This is Mr. Paul Peabody from New York, and I want to perform under your acoustic vault." So I just quickly looked him up online and I found out that he has been the chief composer and the violinist of the Titanic track. And he also used to perform with Michael Jackson. So I said, "Paul, thank you so much for reaching out. I'm really happy to have you here, but I will not have a Michael Jackson audience for you." So he said, "No, absolutely, that's absolutely fine." I said, "The audience that I have will be the 500 people with whom I'm building that whole campus." So he's like, "Oh, that's a perfect audience." So I was like, "Please, welcome." So the next time he was in India, just after 2 months, he actually flew down to Pondicherry and he started, the minute he entered that space, and the beauty about acoustic spaces is that you can hear sound differently the minute you are in an acoustically wonderful space. So he just entered that space, he felt different. In fact, his volume slowed down. He wasn't speaking loudly. In fact, he started speaking softer. And then he started performing the track on his violin. And it was mesmerizing. It was mesmerizing. I can never forget that day. In fact, he went all around that gigantic building and he was listening to how the notes are reverberating from every corner, from the center, from the side. And even for him, it was a fascinating experience. And through the whole process, I learned a great deal about myself as an architect. And with him was another musician, and he told me something remarkable. So at the time, whilst designing that building, interestingly enough, I had started learning Hindustani classical music as a vocalist. And the reason I had started learning that whole genre of music, and I was part of the Patiala Gharana, was this beautiful line by the German philosopher Goethe, where he says architecture is frozen music and music is fluid architecture. And it was such a powerful realization. And the more I thought about it, I was meditating on that line for days and weeks, if not months. And the more I dwelled on that line, I realized the insight and the power of that line. Because these are the two professions which are completely created from human imagination. There is nothing in nature that can actually be replicated, so to say, as is. The way a painter can actually paint a landscape which is already existing and it becomes a painting. A photographer can actually photograph something which is already there in the real world and it becomes his own artwork. A sculptor can actually see a human being and sculpt it into a piece of marble. So there are so many professions which are representations of what already exists in nature. Whereas music and architecture are two professions which are completely created from human imagination. And the beauty of it is that both these professions are on exactly opposite sides of the spectrum of the 5 elements. So if I say that the 5 elements go from the subtlest to the grossest, which is they go from space, air, fire, water and earth, where space is the subtlest element and earth is the grossest element. Music is at the subtle level because it is created in space, Akash. Whereas architecture is at the other extreme of the grossest element, which is earth. So there was this invisible correlation between architecture and music in that beautiful line by this German philosopher, and it captivated me like nothing else. I mean, I was obsessed with it. And in fact, I even wrote a play after that in which I have 2 characters, one playing a musician and one playing an architect, and how they rediscover each other in the real world. So when he was going around it, and when I was listening, so he said, "Trupti, why don't you sing a few lines?" So I started singing Under the Vault. And the other gentleman who was with him was an expert in harmonics. And he said, Trupti, do you know which note is lingering the longest in the space after you stop singing? I said, I don't know, can you tell me? So he said it's B flat. And that was like a thunderbolt moment for me because my sa is B flat. And had the radius of the volt been even 10 centimeters higher or 10 centimeters lower, the harmonic of that space would have been different. Which means that the radius of that volt was exactly to capture my own voice. It was literally architecture as frozen music because it was that sa which I used to sing as the starting sa of my music, which had literally become the architecture. So that was a life-changing realization for me. And after that, when Paul finished playing his entire Titanic track, and I think he played for over an hour, and all of us were mesmerized just listening to where the sound was coming to us from various angles. After that, he said something which will remain with me forever. He was so silent. He was silent for about 3-4 minutes after that. He had just closed his eyes and he was just listening. After which he opened his eyes and said, Trupti, the earth below me has become the sky above me. When I was playing, the earth was listening. And for me, that was such a deep and a profound response that it wasn't just the earth of that building, of that campus which was listening, but it was the earth which was listening because the earth is connected. The soil is connected. All boundaries of states and nations are human-made boundaries. So it was that vibration which has been set out into the universe is here to stay, and it will amplify and magnify for those people who are vibrating at that frequency.
Wow. Architecture as frozen music.
And music as fluid architecture.